over the weekend, a client reached out telling me that he couldn't pay our fee anymore, that he had essentially run out of money. He was in the red, and so he was cutting costs everywhere he could. He had to let go of an employee, and it was really rough. And so we worked out well, not really an official plan or anything, but basically we're helping him out for free until he gets back on his feet and he's able to afford us again. But there is a couple of lessons to take away here. And let me give you a bit of context before we get into the lessons. The context was that his office, without exaggeration, probably gets 95% of their patients from our advertising. So he is very dependent on our work and also the effectiveness of platforms like Google and Meta for bringing him new patients. All right. And when you run advertising, unless you have a significant budget that local dental offices usually never do, you will run into inevitably periods of variance, times where results are very good and amazing, and times where results aren't very good. And this is just natural. So the approach that we as advertisers take is to look at the average across a month or so and use that to gauge our improvements to the advertising strategy. But because he was so dependent and because he had created a ecosystem that was so vulnerable to variance, that when there was that dip in a week, he would become very reactive and reach out to us with ideas he had got by leveraging ChatGPT, having overnight sessions with it, and developing a new game plan that he would present to us. And many of the times, and he would just email us straight the ChatGPT responses. So I was basically reading what he was going through with ChatGPT. And needless to say, a lot of the times I push back saying that this isn't how we should do things. This is straight up a bad recommendation that sometimes ChatGPT would tell him. But because of that reactivity, we would implement a couple of things and we would show him, and it would make the results even worse. So we would revert it back to how it was before. Time would pass, another dip, more ideas, and so on and so forth, until finally, about a month ago, we experienced another dip. And this time he requested this massive list, this massive strategy for how they could eliminate variance and get more patients than ever, ideas by ChatGPT. And even after pushback, we ended up implementing them, long story short, and it completely wiped out results. So what had happened was advertising platforms, they leverage past performance data in order to understand where the advertisements work best, who it's best shown to, what kind of behavior users need to have, and when it comes into contact with them, the advertisement, it works best with those kinds of people. All that data was wiped away because of the severity of the changes that he wanted us to implement. And so the platforms were like, oh, this is a completely new objective. Therefore, this past data that we had collected through years of working with this guy is kind of useless. And so therefore, we as platforms should start learning and regenerating better data for this specific objective. And so all of the past performance kind of got wiped out, and now we were starting from ground zero. And so predictably, his results were wiped out as well, and hence why he wasn't able to afford paying us. All right, a couple of takeaways I think we can have from this, and I think there's three main ones. And the first is to not be reactive, just not in terms of advertising, definitely don't be reactive there, but just in terms of strategy as well. That if we think back to the hierarchy of goals being at the top, strategy being our approach to accomplishing that goal, and tactics, the implementation of that strategy, When we see that our work and our efforts aren't bringing the results and the goal that we seek to accomplish, that we shouldn't immediately go back to the strategy and start looking at what is going wrong. And not necessarily even look at the tactics, but we should at least start with the tactics first. But what he was doing was going back and being reactive to how his strategy would change. And that is not the right approach in terms of advertising. It's also not the right approach in terms of marketing in general, because strategy encompasses things like how you seek to show up, the positioning that you have in the market. So are you going to be someone who is leading with quality? Are you going to be leading with cost effectiveness? All these different ideas. And if we're just changing that for each patient, of course, it's not going to build into anything greater. And so this leads into the second idea of building assets. And I'm not talking about assets like equipment or technology or any of those stuff. I'm talking about assets, which are things you can build, things that you can affect in terms of development that will help you achieve your goal as time goes on. So things like relationships, things like trust, reputation, these are intangible things that are assets. If you have more trust with the people, it will help you achieve your goal. If you have better relationships, if you have a larger network, if you have even like a membership plan, a list of people is something tangible, that is an asset. And it will help your level of reactivity because now you're less dependent on advertising because you've built these assets, which are also churning out your results towards the goal that you seek to accomplish. So you can get through weeks and even months of variance. So yeah, build assets, right? And the third and final takeaway is to really be careful when you're leveraging AI. And this is probably a sentiment that you're hearing more and more now, but it's also very common that when I go into consultations or meetings with clients or prospective clients, that they will come having done a lot of back and forth with things like ChatGPT, with Claude. And I've noticed that a lot of the recommendations they're receiving are outdated or ineffective, or they miss a huge portion of the context that would have completely steered that recommendation in a different direction. But the problem is with AI is, one, it's trained on user feedback. You know, when you ask a question, it gives you a response and asks which one you like more. People will choose things that reassure them, that give them confirmation bias. And so the method that LLMs are being trained right now is leading to a lot of false confidence, a lot of confirmation bias. And so be very skeptical with the things that it's recommending. And also that when we're looking at how these LLMs work, they tend to get the average. So if you seek an answer to a question and there's a whole range of answers, it will get you the one with the most average, like the most cited, the most the status quo approach to doing stuff. And when you do that, typically when it comes to strategy, the status quo is always lagging behind what is actually effective and working. And so therefore, this whole idea of leveraging ChatGPT to determine strategy is backwards. It's going to have you show up as a follower. It's going to have you doing things that are ineffective and outdated. So be very careful with leveraging AI unless you know what to ask it, which is a catch-22 paradox, because you wouldn't be asking it if you knew what the answer already was. But in order to arrive at the solution, you have to understand what to ask it, and you also have to understand where you should challenge it and push back on it, which if you don't know the solution, you can't do it, right? So it's a very complex catch-22. That said, I would leverage AI. I would recommend you leverage AI by having it challenge your assumptions, by having you assess in a different way to give you a different perspective on things. But beyond that, be very careful with leveraging AI. All right, so to wrap it up, a client had a very detrimental results for his practice for many reasons, but primarily because of his reactivity, which was caused because he wasn't able to incorporate assets into the entire ecosystem and his business model. and because of his dependency with advertising, and also when seeking an answer, he was leveraging ChatGPT, which was giving him outdated strategy. And another quick note on advertising. I've also noticed more and more dentists who are starting to leverage advertising. And as more and more people start leveraging this, and regardless of the number of people leveraging it, but advertising itself is just decreasing in its effectiveness, not just in terms of cost effectiveness, but also in terms of the results that you will see. Lots of factors, but primarily because our ability to collect data is being throttled. Like privacy protections, HIPAA laws make it so that we get less data per activity with the user. And like I mentioned, data is how these platforms understand how to improve your ads, how these algorithms understand how to improve your ads. So with reduced data, it's going to perform worse. It's going to get more costly for you to get that data, and it's going to take more time before the results improve. Now, with more people coming in and leveraging advertising, again, the profit margins now diminish because it's an auction system. More people in that auction, the less likely that you're going to come away with it askew in value, right? All these factors make it so that advertising is in a really weird spot now. Contradictory to that effect, a lot of dental offices rely on advertising. Like I say, 95% of his patients came from advertising. It's not uncommon that some offices rely on 80% or 90% of their advertising or other new patients on advertising. And I think it's more important than ever before in order to start understanding how to get away from that, to build word of mouth as an asset, to have that become the new patient acquisition method for your office. So eventually, when you build that asset large enough, when you have other people who are spreading the word about you and doing the marketing for you, you completely remove advertising and dependency on other third-party systems for your acquisition, right? Because right now what it looks like, it's an agency, or it's Google, or it's Meta who is responsible for your new patient acquisition. No wonder there's so much variance. You have all your eggs in one or two or three baskets. But when we're able to leverage word of mouth, another factor is that it's diversification. Now, every patient who comes in has the potential to become an evangelist, a salesperson, someone who's spreading awareness about you, right? We're now able to diversify our efforts, and you get way more stability with that. All right, so these are just some ideas and some takeaways that I think we should really consider. If you're interested in learning how to build word of mouth, I have a free course. Check it out in the description. Other than that, hope you guys liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.